What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my second channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. It's been 7 days since Boruto started getting up before dawn to train. The night Tsunade visited was a restless one for him, having tossed and turned in his bed without being able to go back to sleep. Getting frustrated by it, he found himself grabbing his weapon pouch at 5 in the morning and going out to look for a training ground available. The one he found was secluded enough for him to feel comfortable with using his more than average skills, though never resorting to using his karma or Jogen. He did target practice and laps push-ups, and a lot of sparring one-on-one with his clone jutsu. Practice was a thing he only started to do after 3 more sleepless nights, and he quickly found himself doing it more and more, exhausting his chakra reserves. After running out of chakra, he pushed his body to the absolute limit with rigorous psychical training starting early in the mornings, and coming back late in the afternoon was not something he planned on doing at first, but as time passed he found that it was easier that way. Although he did miss Himawari and Sarada, he was also kind of relieved that he doesn't need to see them much every time he looked at them, and this time he wanted to drop to his knees and beg them to forgive him for bringing them here. If only he was stronger, he could have taken on Kara in a way that no one had to get hurt, nobody needed to die, and he wouldn't have had to fight him, thus dragging his friend and little sister to this time. Either it was his fault, he knew it, and no matter what Himawari or Sarada would say, they probably thought the same. He was weak, and because of that they lost everything and are now living in an era that exists almost 20 years before their time, and a small misstep might blow them out of existence. He hated it. Focusing on the wood pillar he was hitting, he threw another punch his master giving him advice on how to counter a certain jutsu. Dead punch his friends eating at the burger place and throwing fries on each other for fun. Gon punch his grandfather and aunt sitting at the table with him in the Hyuga manner and talking, his grandfather wearing a red scarf. Also Gon punch his mother laughing at him, and Himawari fighting their father over a cake not coming back. He punched the pillar with more force. Punch his father, letting him ride on his shoulders and telling him stories about his adventures. Dead and they're not coming back ever, whispered a small voice in his head. Shut up. Boruto punched the pillar with so much force it broke, bruising his hand in the process. Damn it, he looked at his injured hand, the skin of the knuckle split and blood coming out of the wounds. He ignored the pain in his hand and looked at the wood pillar he destroyed. The thing was blown to bits, splinters and wood chunks everywhere. He must have subconsciously infused chakra with his punches Sarada taught him how to do once. Boruto went back to examine his injuries. This is the worst he could go to Sarada to have her heal it in a few seconds, but she's been swamped ever since she took Tsunade's proposal to be her student a week ago, and he didn't want to bother her with something like this while she worked at the hospital, and Himawari would only worry about him if he asked her to bandage his hands, so he can't go to her either. Reluctantly he figured his only solution is to go to Tsunade for help. It was around 10 in the morning, so she should already be in her office, and he might as well go there too. Deliver Himawari's invitation for the Hokage to come to have dinner at their apartment. She mentioned it the other night at dinner, so Boruto figured it would be alright if he invited her. Grabbing his kunai and shuriken, he placed them back in his pouch and walked away from the training ground. The streets of Konoha were already busy in this hour, and many people swamped the marketplace. As he made his way through it, a few people would look at him from time to time as if they recognized him, but since he had only one eye open and 2 patches covering his cheeks, nobody could say for certain they knew him. He knew why those people thought so, though. He looked almost exactly like his father, especially at this age, so they probably thought that Naruto was back in the village. According to Tsunade, his father was out of the village for a training trip with Jiraiya for almost 3.5 years. Sakura was working in the hospital ever since, and Sasuke was with Orochimaru. Boruto had only met the snake summoner a few times, and aside from Mitsuki, he couldn't fathom who would want to stay with Orochimaru for years out of choice. Mitsuki was Orochimaru's son, and even though Boruto had been told that the man had calmed down a lot since his prime, that just meant that in this period Orochimaru was still the criminal the history books always described. So for Sasuke to go to a person like that willingly, his master had to be a different person than who Boruto knew. He wasn't the Sasuke Boruto knew, but the Sasuke who many people thought of as a criminal. That knowledge wasn't easy for Sarada or Boruto to deal with after getting all of the facts from Tsunade, but he knew Sarada had it rougher than him. Her father was nothing like the guy who existed in this P, and Boruto didn't know how he would react if he ever met him, although he didn't know how he'd react if he met his mother or father from this time. They were different people, at least in his eyes. The events that made Then the people he knew all his life still didn't happen for them, and they still haven't changed them for the better or the worse. Himawari has been going to see Niji and Hanabi almost every day since they arrived, and even though Boruto would never tell her that he was worried about her being at the Hyuga Manor all day, she might run into their mother if she stays there too long, and he didn't know what she or he would do if that situation arises. He allowed those confused thoughts to fill his head and let his legs walk him to the Hokage Tower on their own. Walking up the stairs to Tsunade's office, he remembered all of the times he walked down the halls leading to the Hokage's office in his childhood, either to prank, give food and clothes, or just visit his old man. A lot of time has passed ever since he pranked his father though, which must mean he grew up. So much time has passed between when he was just a kid starting in the academy, almost 9 years. Thinking like that made him feel old. Reaching Tsunade's door, it took him a moment to remember why he was there in the first place. He glanced down at his hand, seeing it dripping blood on the carpet from the wounded knuckles reminded him of the reason. I really shouldn't forget about my injuries like this. Knocking on the door, he heard the come-in from the other side and entered the office. Tsunade lifted her head from the pile of documents she was working on and raised her eyebrows in surprise. Boruto, what are you doing here? Boruto held his injured hand out for her to see. I had a little training accident, he explained. Think you can help me out? Tsunade sighed. Come here. She motioned for him to step closer and give her his hand, so he did. She examined his wounds and started to heal them, a green aura emitting from her palm and sending a soothing sensation throughout his body from his hand. How did you get this? Tsunade asked him, while looking at the wound she was healing. I may have punched a wood pillar too hard, Boruto told her. Sheepishly, Tsunade rolled her eyes and moved to the next knuckle. May have. Alright, I did it, he admitted, but it started. It sure it did. Tsunade let go of his hand and he brought it closer to his face to examine it. Other than the smeared blood, no indication of wounds was seen on the skin, not even a small scar. I guess this is why you're the #1 healer in all of the 5 nations, Boruto told the woman. Oh, please, every medic worth their talent would be able to do something as simple as this. Tsunade dismissed his words. I got the title by being able to connect someone's torso with his lower half and have him walk afterward, right? Boruto didn't know how to react to that. He just wondered if Sarada would ever need to fix someone's cut-in-half body in her career. He hoped that if she does, he wouldn't be in the room to watch. Speaking of which, say, how's Sarada doing in the hospital? Boruto decided to ask the Hokage. She's doing well, Tsunade told him. Without taking her eyes off of the documents in front of her, it didn't take her a lot of time to adapt to the environment, and she's good at managing the work there as well as her studies. I see, that's good. Boruto nodded, feeling relieved. It is, but it's not what you wanted to know, is it? Tsunade looked at him, a knowing look in her eyes. You wanted to know how she's doing with Sakura working there too? Yeah. Boruto stared at the village from Tsunade's windows and didn't look at her directly. I can't imagine she just accepted that and moved on. He couldn't imagine himself doing well if he was in Sarada's place. Well, I can't say it has been easy for her. From what I hear, Tsunade informed him, she's been having some trouble adjusting to it, but I hope it's only temporary. I see. Boruto made a note to himself to ask Sarada about it the next chance he gets. Well, I better get going. Just a moment, Boruto. Tsunade stopped him. I have one more thing to tell you before you go. What is it? Boruto asked, glancing at her over his shoulder. I got word from Jiraiya, she told him, and he tensed. If she got word from Jiraiya, that must mean, are they coming back? He asked her in what he hoped seemed a nonchalant manner, even though his heart was beating in his ears. They started heading back about 7 days ago, so they should be here sometime between this week and the next. Tsunade looked him in the eye. When they do come back, how do you want to handle it? Do you want to tell him? Not tell him, but be introduced to him? I don't know. Boruto made a non-committed gesture with his hands. He didn't know how to handle the topic yet, and it made him restless to think about it. All I do know is that it's not my decision to make alone. I'll ask Himawari about it and come back to you. Alright. Tsunade nodded. Oh, and Boruto? Yeah. Boruto wondered what it can be this time. I take it that if you're training, you're planning on registering as a shinobi? Tsunade asked him, interlocking her fingers and looking at him expectantly. I don't know. Yet maybe Boruto wasn't sure why he was training, other than the fact that he couldn't allow himself to be weak anymore. He couldn't allow himself to be caught unprepared again, no matter what. Very well. Tsunade went back to looking at her document. Tell me when you decide. I will. Thanks, Granny. Boruto thanked her with a smirk, slipping out of the room and closing the door behind him just as the sound of something heavy crashing into the door was heard, and knew he had barely avoided being hit by whatever it was that Tsunade tried to throw on his head. He heard her grunting something about idiot blonde kids, calling her grandma, and chuckled. Some things will never change no matter what time it is. Moving away from the door in case Tsunade decides to follow him, he walked down the hall back outside. He should go back to training. He rested too much. He needs to train as much as he can to protect his sister and friend. He swore to himself he would never let them or him feel helpless ever again. I Wonder how they're doing, he thought to himself. I barely saw them this week. Sarada felt helpless. It's been over a week since she has started her internship at the hospital and her studies under Tsunade, and while the studying part was going almost hitch-free, she found out that she had forgotten that the internship part came with an issue of sorts. Her mother's younger self, Sakura Haruno. Honestly, she should have thought about it when she agreed to Tsunade's offer. Tsunade had asked her about it and Sarada had said it would be fine, but it wasn't. Sakura was nice and she offered her help and guidance, but Sarada couldn't even look at her without feeling like crying. It frustrated her to no end knowing that her mother isn't her mother and doesn't know her. It frustrated her because she knew that no matter what she couldn't force the Pinkette to just remember her, and even if she could she shouldn't. Sakura probably thought Sarada hated her, seeing as whenever they were in the same room for more than a couple of minutes Sarada would find an excuse to bolt out of there. She focused on her studies instead, trying to think of other things like learning new techniques and healing the injured. That morning Sarada was dropping off some documents at the reception desk when two ninjas barged in through the front doors with a third one between them, screaming in pain and his blood spraying everywhere. One glance at the bleeding stump that was once his arm clued Sarada on what happened and what needed to be done. Without hesitation she ordered two nurses to bring the man into the operating room immediately and tied her hair in a short ponytail. Running after the nurses, the gurney, and the screaming bleeding man, she passed Sakura, who was just running in the opposite direction to her, to assist the two remaining shinobi who also had wounds, though minor. Do you need any help? Sakura asked her without even stopping in her tracks. No, I can handle it, Sarada yelled back as she slammed the doors of the OR behind her. The man was on the operating table with one of the nurses holding him down while another one was tying a tourniquet just above the bleeding part. Sarada did not hesitate and dived into work immediately. Summoning chakra into her palms, she began the healing process, imagining the severed tendons, blood vessels, bones and skin that was split when the man had his arm cut off slowly become whole again. She couldn't create a new limb for him, but she could close the wound, though his career as a shinobi will probably end the moment she's done. She shook those thoughts out of her head and focused on the task at hand. It was taking a lot out of her since she was at the end of her night shift, having spent so much chakra already. She felt her reserves grow smaller by the minute and she felt dizzy. What wouldn't she give for her warm bed right now? If only she could lay her head on the pillow, close her eyes and drift off into sleep until she woke up again safe in her home. Her mother waking her up early for her mission, and her father drinking coffee at the table with a scroll rolled out in front of him. What wouldn't she give? San Sarada-san. The nurse shook her shoulder and startled her out of her dizzy state. Sarada blinked around her in surprise. Was she drifting off while in mid-healing? I said you can stop healing him, Sarada-san. The nurse repeated what she told her. Sarada looked down and found that instead of the bleeding wound she was healing, there was now a closed, clean stump without even the hint of a scar. Another nurse was currently cleaning off the blood that had already sprayed out before Sarada started her healing. Right, sorry. Sarada didn't know where to look. She lost her concentration. It can't happen again. Why won't you go clean up? The nice nurse smiled at her. We'll finish up here. Sure, thanks. Sarada wandered out of the room in a haze. She went into the interns' lockers and opened hers, taking out new scrubs and changing into those in the women's bathroom. She can't let herself be lost in thoughts again during a healing procedure, especially during a healing procedure. There are people's lives at stake and she needs to be able to take care of them with a focused mind. Coming out of the bathroom, she walked back to the reception desk to pick up the documents for the new patient. Unfortunately for her, Sakura was there as well, talking with the receptionist, breathing in slowly and then releasing. Sarada made her way to them with a smile. Sarada San. The receptionist noticed her first, cutting the conversation between her and Sakura short. Here for the patient admission papers. Sarada nodded. Yeah, do you have them? She tried not to glance at Sakura while talking to the woman, though the Pinkette was staring at her. Right here. The receptionist handed her a few stacked papers. Thank you. Sarada took them from her. Okay, and now to get out of here before Sarada-san. Sakura called Sarada, making the latter flinch internally. Great, what is it, Sakura-san? Sarada tried her best to put on a neutral face. How is the patient? Sakura asked her. Were you able to take care of him? Yes. Sarada nodded curtly. Aside from a missing arm, there's no trace of any injury really. Sakura looked at her with widened eyes. You managed to close the wound that professionally? Sarada furrowed her eyebrows. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? Well, I don't know. Sakura rolled her eyes. Maybe because you've only been here about a week. You've got a natural talent for this. Tsunade Shisho only allowed me to work in the hospital after I've trained for a year. Oh right. Sarada sweat dropped. She forgot that to Sakura and everyone else here she was some kind of genius Tsunade recruited who only trained for a short while before starting to work in the hospital. None of them were aware that she had almost 4 years of training under her belt. Oh well, might as well play along to keep her cover right. Well, I met her when Himawari was admitted here, and after we talked about medicine and healing for a while she thought that I looked promising enough, so she offered me to learn under her. She lied. It wasn't a full lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She felt somewhat bad for lying to Sakura like that. I see. Sakura smiled at her. Were you interested in medicine in your old village? Sarada froze and looked at her with something she felt equal to shock and anger. She felt all of her body tense and noticed that Sakura flinched at her reaction. I need to go now. Sarada avoided the question and grabbed the papers from where she laid them on the counter. I have other patients to tend to. Right? Sakura looked like she wanted to ask her something else and was biting her lip. So I'll see you later. Sarada was caught off guard with that question. I guess. And with that not clear response she all but fled from the scene. She walked as fast as she could until she was sure Sakura couldn't see her, and collapsed against the wall. She held her face with her hands. I can't believe I almost screwed up my cover being around Sakura like that when their relationship was barely that of colleagues. She didn't know what to do. It felt wrong, but on the other hand she wasn't sure what would feel right. Does she want Sakura to act as her mother did? Probably not. It would be weird and might make people suspicious, but what does she want? This is insane. Sarada determined. I'm too busy to worry about something stupid like this. I have patients that need my help, and after that I still need to go borrow some books from the hospital's library, and then I have a break, so I should probably swing by the apartment to see how Himawari's doing now. With a schedule in mind she got up from the floor and dusted her lab coat, resolving not to think about Sakura or her complicated situation anymore. Sarada grabbed her papers and made her way to her new patient's room. She has work to do. You don't have to come to visit me every day. Nijinisan Himawari scolded her uncle lightly after opening the door and seeing him waiting for her to allow him to enter the apartment. I can be alone for a few hours. It's no big deal. Even though she said that she moved and allowed him to come, and I know you can take care of yourself, Himawari Niji said as he took off his shoes at the entrance. But that doesn't mean I won't worry. Himawari giggled. You're such a worrywart. Nijinisan, did Hanabi-sama tell you to say that to me? Niji glanced at her. Maybe. Himawari smiled mysteriously and skipped happily down the hall to the kitchen. Want me to make us some tea? That would be nice, thank you. Niji nodded curtly and took a seat next to the table. No problem. Himawari smiled at him from the counter. I just finished sculpting another mug yesterday, so I thought it might be good to test it out. She took out said mug from the cabinet and showed it to him. It was a white mug with a handle and was decorated with delicate drawings of branches and birds drawn with neat black lines. What do you think? I think it looks very impressive, Niji said, nodding at the mug to show his approval. I didn't know you're so skilled at making things. Himawari shrugged as she filled the teapot with water from the sink. I stayed at home most of my childhood, so I needed to find stuff to occupy myself with. She placed the teapot over the stove and lit the fire underneath it. I learned how to cook, clean, draw, fight, do laundry, make baskets, mugs, and other stuff. It's pretty fun once you get the hang of it. Niji listened to with interest. Did Hinata-sama teach you all of that? Some of it. Himawari smiled as she remembered fondly the time she spent together with her mom, creating things together and enjoying each other's company. The rest I learned from different people I knew. I see. Niji smiled slightly. It's nice to know Hinata-sama has such a nice future awaiting her. Himawari stared at him. For a moment he looked happy knowing that her mother was happy, but she didn't know what he thought about his future. Did he have anything he wanted to accomplish, any dreams he wanted to fulfill? Say, Niji-nisan, what is it? Niji looked up at her from his thoughts. She didn't know how to approach the subject without raising some suspicion from him. Do you have a girlfriend? Himawari asked him without realizing what came out of her mouth until she noticed the look on his face. It was somewhere between shocked and flushed and flabbergasted. What was all that came out of his mouth? Do you have a girlfriend? Himawari repeated the question, a bit embarrassed herself. She didn't want to pry, but even she heard the rumors about him and Ten and their mysterious relationship back in the day. She couldn't help but wonder how much of that is true. Well, I can't say that I do, Niji said, sounding like he was choosing his words carefully. What? Himawari felt disappointed. But what about Ten-san? Niji looked surprised. What about her? Isn't there something between you two? Himawari was starting to understand that her uncle may be a lost cause when it came to romance, as evident to her from the past few days when they hung out together. He always watched couples they passed in the streets in something akin to wonderment and puzzlement, no real interest. Well, Niji drawled on his response and Himawari tensed. Could it be she's right and there is something? I wouldn't exactly call it something between us, as you put it, but at the same time I wouldn't be able to deny that there isn't something. Himawari blinked. What do you mean? He was pretty cryptic with his answer, making her even more confused. Himawari Niji pinched the bridge of his nose, looking and sounding uncomfortable discussing the subject with her. I'm almost 17 years old. I'm aware that people may not always understand the way I think, but I'm also a male. I think about relationships just as much as anyone else. But Himawari Felt there's a little more to it than that, but even if I do think about those things, I am first and foremost a shinobi of the village and a Hyuga. I need to focus on my work as a jonin, and I don't have much time for romance. That's still not answering the question I asked you. Himawari poured the hot water into 2 mugs that she had prepared and turned off the stove. Is there something between you and Tenon-san or not? Niji sighed. Maybe, he said. And when he saw that Himawari was still not satisfied with his answer, he made an effort to elaborate. It's complicated, Himawari. Both Ten and I care about our careers as shinobi, which is one of the things we respect each other for. We are teammates above all else. He closed his eyes. But we are not just teammates. I wouldn't even call it friends. It's something beyond it, though neither she nor I want to define it. So that is that. He looked at her completely giddy face. Are you satisfied now? Yup, Himawari laughed. It was pretty funny to see you get flustered like that. I was not flustered, Niji told her with a stern expression. It was a rather inappropriate question, and I just did my best to answer it seriously. Sure. Himawari placed the 2 steaming mugs on the table and took the seat in front of him. Whatever you say, Niji needs, and she happily sipped on her tea, giggling inwardly at the disapproving look he gave her. Enough about me, Niji told her as he encircled his mug with both his hands. How have you been? Didn't you just see me yesterday? Himawari pointed out, head tilted. What could have changed so much in just a day? You know what I meant by that, Himawari. Niji sipped from his tea for a short moment before placing the mug back down. I wanted to know how you were feeling in general about everything. Himawari sat in silence for a moment, looking down at her tea. She raised her head to him and gave him a small smile. I'm fine, Niji needs, and nothing to worry about. Niji stared at her for a moment before turning his head and looking around the kitchen. It's very clean here, he noted. Himawari, confused at his sudden change of subject, nodded. Yeah, well, I didn't have much to do, so I cleaned. And have you been eating? Niji swiped a glance at her. Not a lot. Himawari stared at the spotless table, a result of her cleaning spree earlier that morning. I don't have much appetite. I think you should eat more, Niji told her. It's fine, Niji needs, and Himawari dismissed him. I don't usually eat much as it is. Niji raised an eyebrow. Really, he asked her in a tone that said, are you trying to lie to me? Because if I recall correctly, the day after we met for the first time, we took you to lunch at a cafe and you devoured a large plate of cinnamon rolls by yourself. I would. That a rather large appetite, wouldn't you? Himawari shifted in her chair nervously. Well, Himawari, Niji's voice had a harsh edge to it. Have you been sleeping well? Himawari couldn't answer his question without lying, and she knew he knew it. I see, Niji sighed. Himawari couldn't make eye contact with him. He was right. She hadn't been eating or sleeping well at all, not to mention she might have been going overboard with the cleaning. When my father died, Niji's words startled her from her guilty thoughts. Why was he talking about his father all of a sudden? When he died, I used to collapse about 3 times a week for a month. I had no appetite, so I had no strength, and yet I continued to train, resulting in me collapsing a lot. But I didn't care. The training was a way for me to still feel connected to him, so I continued to train. I didn't want to admit he was gone, and I made myself suffer for it, even if not intentionally. I bottled up my feelings and took it out on my surroundings, especially Hinata-sama, which is something I regret to this very day. Himawari looked at him with widened eyes. He saw right through her. He noticed that she was cleaning so much because it made her feel connected to her mother, that she bottled up her feelings. She tried to fight back the sudden tears. Niji noticed that and smiled softly, covering one of her hands with his own. There is no need to hold back around me, Himawari, he told her quietly. Present or future, I am your uncle. Your family worrying about you comes with the title, so don't worry about crying in front of me. Himawari sniffed, and despite his words, she tried to swallow back the lump blocking her throat. She couldn't let herself cry, because her brother and Sarada were doing their best to be brave too, so she can't break down. She needs to show them there's no need to worry about her. She felt Niji squeezing her hand reassuringly and smiled at him through eyes full of unshed tears. She hoped he knew how grateful she is that he is there for her, though she had a feeling he did. Have you tried talking to Boruto or Sarada-san? Niji asked her softly. Himawari shook her head. No, I don't want to bother them. She played with her mug, running her fingers on its edge. Himawari, Niji almost sounded disappointed. You won't be bothering them. What you are feeling is normal, and it is all but expected of you to be this way. Himawari looked into his lavender eyes, the eyes that were so much like her mother's. Tell me, are you angry? Niji asked her, making her blink in surprise and to allow some of her tears to fall down her cheeks. Angry, she repeated after him, voice cracking a little. Why would I be? Himawari, you have lost more than just your parents. You've lost your village and friends as well. It is okay to be angry about that, to blame someone for it, Niji explained to her. Himawari Nodded slowly. I know, but she didn't know. Angry at someone, blaming someone. Who should she be angry at? Who would she blame? Oh, Himawari's eyes widened as a familiar face popped into her mind. I see. She bit her lip nervously. Himawari. Niji looked at her concerned. It's nothing, she said. Just I back. Sarada's voice interrupted Himawari mid-sentence, and the sound of the door opening and closing made both her and Niji jump. Himawari hurried and wiped the few tears on her cheeks away before Sarada appeared. In the entrance to the kitchen, she was carrying a few books with her. Oh, Niji-san. Sarada noticed. Niji, how are you? I am good, thank you. Niji nodded to the raven-haired, but I'm afraid I should be going now. I only stopped by to check on Himawari. Now that you are here, I should go back to my duties. He got up from his chair and placed his mug, the one that Himawari drew birds and branches on, in the sink. He passed Himawari on his way out of the kitchen, his left hand squeezing her shoulder for a moment, showing support. All right. Sarada placed the pile of books she was carrying on the table. It was nice seeing you, Niji-san. You as well, Sarada-san. Niji bowed his head curtly. Himawari, I hope you'll give what we discussed more thought. I'll try, Himawari told him, smiling, but I can't promise anything. Trying is enough for now. Niji told her with an understanding smile. I'll see you out, Sarada offered, but he shook his head. No need, I'll manage. Okay, take care. Sarada nodded at him. He gave her a nod of his own eye. Will, and with that he exited the kitchen and left the apartment. Seconds afterward, Himawari sat there for a moment, still mulling over her conversation with her uncle before turning to Sarada. I didn't know you'd be back so early, she noted, getting up from her chair. Do you want some tea? I'd love some. Sarada sat down and stretched her arms. And I'm just on a break, I'll have to go back in about an hour. I see. Himawari took a few extra seconds, more than necessary, to pour the tea for Sarada. She made sure to use the black tea powder and not the green tea one like the one she was drinking. And the books, they're studying material for me assigned by Tsunade-sama herself, Sarada informed her, and opened the first book of the pile. I need to work on memorizing them. Himawari felt worried for her friend. Sarada, have you seen these books? They're pretty thick. Are you sure you can do it? Of course I can, Sarada huffed, blowing a few strands of her hair away from her face. This is nothing if you say so. Himawari still felt hesitant as she placed down Sarada's mug. Those books did not look like some light reading material, and the way Sarada has been acting lately, Himawari worried her friend might be letting her work consume her. Biting those words back, she sat down again and decided to concentrate on drinking her tea. She had a feeling that if she brought that topic to Sarada, the girl would either deny it or tell her she's imagining it, and she didn't want that. Besides, it was just a theory. Maybe she was wrong. Noticing that her mug was empty, she got up with a sigh and placed it in the sink. The words Niji told her made her think. In many aspects he was right about her. She did clean to feel close to her mother, but when he said those things about blame and anger, something bugged her. She glanced at Sarada and was tempted to talk to her about it, but the Uchiha was already engrossed in her books, nose inches from the page. Maybe another time, Himawari figured. Looking at the clock, she noticed that lunchtime was approaching fast. She still didn't prepare anything since she wanted to wait for her brother to come home before she starts, though that might not happen considering he barely returned home the last few days. She only saw glimpses of him here and there this last week. He wouldn't be avoiding her, right? It couldn't be that. There must be another explanation. Sarada, Himawari called her. Sarada barely lifted her eyes from the book to look at Himawari. Do you want something particular for lunch? Oh, Sarada shook her head. I'll be going back to the hospital before lunch, so I'll just get something from the vending machine. I see. Himawari nodded and left Sarada to return to her book, so she would be eating alone again. She had enough groceries for herself, though they were getting a little short on money. Sarada is still interning at the hospital, so she won't be getting paid for a while longer, meaning that their only source of income is the thin envelope Tsunade gave them. She hoped her brother was thinking of ways to make more money for them while he's out. She wondered what he was doing all day. Even if she could tell from the dirty clothes she has seen in the laundry basket every night, he was training hard. Was he planning on going back to being a shinobi? Is that why he is working so hard? Going back to being a kunoichi might be a good thing for me too, Himawari thought to herself. She wondered if she could do it since she hasn't touched her weapon pouch ever since they got here. It's not like it's a bad idea, but still I should think about it some more before making a decision. Himawari decided maybe I should ask Oniai-chan when he's here, resolving to corner her brother and talk to him the next time she sees him. She walked out of the kitchen into the balcony where she hung the laundry last night. Those clothes won't fold themselves, but if I'm going back to being a kunoichi, I should probably start training again soon, Himawari realized as she took the clothes off the rope she hung them on and placed them in the basket that she took outside. Maybe she could ask Niji to train with her since she knew he was a prodigy of the Hyuga and the gentle fist technique. First and foremost, she needs to talk to her brother about it. Something bugged her in the back of her mind. It is okay to be angry about that, to blame someone for it, that's what Niji said. But she still felt conflicted about it. Even if it is, would it be weird for her not to feel anger? Or to blame someone? It is not as if she didn't know who the people responsible for her pain are, but at the same time she doesn't feel like she should be blaming them at all. It confused her, and she was biting back a growl of frustration. She didn't like thinking like that. If only Oniai-chan was here to listen, she thought sadly, but Boruto has been avoiding her for a week and she doesn't see him stop soon. The books Sarada read were truly interesting, and taught her stuff she never knew about the human body. It's been 2 days since she saved the man who has lost his arm, and she was proud to write in her report that he was doing much better than other people in his situation and was expecting full recovery in a few days after some more rest and fluids, since he has lost a lot of blood before arriving at the hospital. Ever since she displayed her skills in the OR, she has gotten called in for a lot of procedures, then before assisting other doctors and at times even taking the lead on surgeries and operations. She was glad that she was getting so much work, because work helped take her mind off things she didn't want to think about. It helped calm her nerves, and as a plus it also helped other people, so it was a win-win situation for all. The other thing that she gained from her increase in work is that she was making a name for herself quickly. Tsunade's new student that was taking the hospital by storm, the Wonder Girl, who appeared out of nowhere. She felt kind of bad for the other interns who worked beside her for taking the spotlight, but they seemed to worship her and her work just as much as everyone else, so she chose to push the small guilt she felt down, receiving the praises from her colleagues graciously and modestly, or at least she hoped it seemed that way. Even Sakura complimented her for the skills she had displayed. It felt weird, the compliments coming from her mouth, like a senior proud of their junior, not of a mother proud of her daughter. But she needs to get used to it and keep her distance from Sakura. She told herself it wasn't personal, but that would be the exact opposite of what she felt. Of course it was personal, and deep down she knew at the sight of her mother so young alone was enough for her stomach to be doing somersaults all over the place. Her throat felt like it's going to be blocked every time she noticed a glimpse of a pink hair around the hall. She couldn't have that. She needs to be focused on her work. Wiping her forehead with a handkerchief, Sarada leaned back on her chair in the break room. She just finished her 8th operation in 12 hours. It was safe to say she was exhausted physically and mentally, not to mention her chakra was almost spent completely. She went through the notes she wrote on her clipboard and made sure she did all of her written tasks. It was getting late, the sky outside slowly turning gold as the afternoon crawled lazily, and she's been on her shift ever since 1 in the morning, and the tiredness was getting to her. Her limbs felt like lead and her mind was almost disconnected from her body, begging her to close her eyes and drown in sweet sleep. She tried to shake those feelings away and focus on the book that sat open on the desk. She was reading and rereading the same paragraph for over 10 minutes, nothing in it registering in her brain. She gave the book another chance, forcing her eyes to move along the line and then down the page. Not managing to read a thing, her brain instead wandered off in a different direction, back to her patients. If she was honest with herself, the number of people she was saving was rather large for someone who barely started working in a hospital a week ago, but she couldn't just tone it down. No matter if she looks more suspicious because of it, those are people's lives, and if she can help in any way she will not hide her skills just to keep herself safe. She will not sacrifice someone else so that she can get out without a scratch, not like her mother did. Her breath hitched and her eyes widened at thought. Why was she thinking like this? She doesn't resent her mother for sacrificing herself. Why would she? Her mother did it to keep her safe. You and all of those people in the hospital, though, what good did it do if you're the only one left? Her mind whispered, and she clenched her teeth. That wasn't true. Her mother tried to save everybody just like a good medic does. That's all. Sure it is. Her mind mocked her. Shut it, she fired back. Make me. It shot back. Ugh, this is insane. Sarada was pretty sure she's losing it. She buried her face in her hands, tired and confused. Oh, a voice from behind her caught the conversation in her head. There you are. Sarada turned around in her chair to see Sakura, whose head popped into the room. I just wanted to let you know Tsunade-sama said she's going to start training you soon, Sakura told her. I see. Sarada tried to keep her face neutral and her voice emotionless in light of her previous thoughts. Sakura might be The last person she needed to talk to right now is that all. Yeah, Sakura nodded and entered fully into the room. That's everything okay. Sarada went back to read her book, or at least pretended to, while she waited for Sakura to exist, but instead the pink-haired girl went up to her locker and took out a book of her own, sitting down in front of Sarada and opening it. Great, it must be the start of her break, Sarada thought to herself in annoyance. She didn't want to feel this way about Sakura, but it felt like her whole being was a mockery to Sarada, that while her mother, the vibrant pink-haired green-eyed medic she admired her entire life, was dead, and just when Sarada was starting to come to terms with it, life just shoved a younger version, that woman, in her face. It angered her. She didn't want to get to know this Sakura, since she felt it would be like replacing her mother with another version. It frustrated her, and she knew it wasn't right of her to think that, but she did say, "Sarada-san." Sakura's voice tore Sarada away from her inner turmoil. "What is it?" Sarada's speech was hard and formal. "Keep your distance." She tried to send the pinkette a message. "I don't want you to be near me. It hurts. Do you hate me?" Sakura's voice was hesitant and small, but her tone and the careful look she sent Sarada were clear as day. Her question hit Sarada like a sack full of bricks. Hate her? How can Sarada hate her? No, she was pushing her away, because the opposite was true. "I don't hate you," Sarada said, quietly looking down at her book instead of looking into those green eyes that haunted her in her dreams. "Then why are you acting like that?" Sakura's expression was invisible to her, but her body shifted on her seat like she was trying to get a better look on Sarada's face. "It's complicated," was all Sarada could say. It was a weak response, and they both knew it. Sakura sighed. "Look, I don't want to pry, but if it's about something I did, just tell me." Her tone was a hurt and small one, unsure of what she should do. "It is about something you did, or more like something you'll do." Sarada thought hopelessly. She couldn't tell her she's mad at her because her future self ran into an on-fire hospital to try and save patients and then exploding before Sarada could get close to it. She couldn't tell her how much she cried or how shocked she felt when she saw the explosion and the smoke, the fire that scorched even the buildings nearby so hot she felt her tears evaporate just by being near it. She couldn't tell her how alone she felt because of it all, how torn apart and scared she is. She just couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, so she settled for an excuse. "You just remind me of someone," Sarada said, and looked into Sakura's eyes, trying to ignore her need to hug her and cry. "And it's a bit difficult, that's all." "Oh, Sakura, went quite well. If you ever need to talk about it, I know." Sarada nodded and gave her a little smile, a perfect fake little smile she'll never be able to tell Sakura, but she wanted to show her that she appreciated the effort. Getting up, she closed the book she had stopped reading a long time ago and pushed the chair back into place. "Where are you going?" Sakura asked her. "My break is over." Sarada lied. She still had 20 minutes more to her break. 20 minutes she could honestly use for sleep, but she just couldn't be in the same room as her right now. It hurt too much. "All right." Sakura nodded. "I'll see you later." Sarada nodded. "Yeah," she said, knowing that if it was up to her that might not be the case. "I'll see you later." She exited the room and closed the door behind her, leaning her back against it and sighing. Talking to Sakura was nerve-wracking and exhausting. She had to carefully choose every word she said and act as cold and distant as she could. She meant what she said in there, that she didn't hate Sakura. She didn't, but every time she saw her, a small part of her wanted to blame the pinkette for everything wrong in her life, for leaving her, and it was that part she hated, not Sakura. Cursing quietly, she wondered what she should do for the remainder of her break. Seeing as relaxing with a book or going to sleep was no longer an option. She was pretty tired, but it's not like there was a lack of things to do around the hospital. She had patients she planned on taking care of later, but she could probably do it now. Instead, looking at her clipboard, she decided to pay a visit to the man who lost his arm. She healed 2 days ago. She just needs to check up with him, and then, if everything goes well, he can go home. Walking to his room, she remembered the first time she visited him a few hours after he lost his arm. He was angry at his loss and took it out on both her and himself, almost throwing a fit. She prescribed painkillers and checked his vitals, and then escaped as soon as she could. While she did feel bad for him, he was getting on her nerves with him saying that losing his arm is the worst thing that could happen to him. She understood his point. As a shinobi, losing an arm and losing your ability to weave hand signs was what terminated your career in most cases, but that man acted like it was the end of the world for him, which Sarada believed was a total exaggeration. Losing your friends, family, and village, that is what most people would consider the end of the world, and yet the world somehow just keeps going. Sarada noted. Reaching his door, she knocked on it and waited for an answer. A woman's voice came from the other side, inviting her inside. She opened the sliding door, walking in and closing it behind her. Good "Afternoon," she said, looking at her patient and the woman sitting next to him, probably his wife. The man looked at her, his bandaged stump barely seen under the loose sleeve of the hospital gown. "I'm here to give you your hopefully last checkup." "Ah, that's great." The woman smiled at her. "So does that mean he can leave after that if nothing is wrong with him?" "Yes." Sarada gave her an encouraging smile. "Now are you ready to start, Mr. Naruka?" "TCH. Might as well get it over with," he grumbled and turned to her. "Now, dear, don't be rude." His wife scolded him. "It's not her fault, I know that," the man said through clenched teeth. He was struggling to restrain himself. "Have you been having any sort of pains in your arm?" Sarada asked him, ignoring his comment. "Of course not, I don't have an arm anymore," the man said bitterly. "I meant your remaining limb, sir," Sarada clarified. "Have you been feeling any sort of pain in it?" She took out a stethoscope and placed the metal against his chest, listening to his heart for a few moments before removing it and jotting a few words on in her clipboard. "No, I'm fine," the man said, a bit impatient. "At least as fine as a person who has just lost his career can be," he added. "That's good to hear." Sarada chose to ignore his last comment as well. He was not happy with his situation, but there was little she could do about it. "Have you been having any trouble adjusting to the use of only one arm?" The man gritted his teeth. "Is that some kind of joke?" he asked her angrily. "Honey, calm down." His wife held his hand in an attempt to soothe him, but he withdrew his hand from her. "No, I won't, because this girl," he almost spit that word, "is mocking me. I assure you I did nothing of the sort, sir," Sarada said politely while trying to keep her calm. "That man is lashing out on her for something she had no control over. He's channeling his anger at her. I was simply asking a question. I do apologize if I said something that offended you." "Of course you did," the man yelled. "Look at me, I have no arm, a shinobi without an arm. I bet you secretly think it's funny, don't you?" he asked, her face twisted in anger and shame. "I don't think it's funny, sir." Sarada closed her clipboard with a swift movement. She managed to understand why he was feeling what he was feeling at last. "I understand more than you realize." "Oh yeah," the man rolled his eyes. "I don't see you struggling with only one arm." "You're right, I have both my arms," Sarada agreed with him. "But my father only had one," she said, ignoring the sharp sting in her chest that happened upon mentioning her father and the surprised looks the man and his wife gave her. "He was a splendid shinobi even with one arm, and he taught me a lot." "Your father was a shinobi?" the woman asked her. "Yes, for a very long time," Sarada told her, a sad smile on her face. "Both he and my mother were on the same team as children, and they both grew up to be a strong ninja who protected this village with their lives." The man swallowed. "What happened to them?" "They died." Her smile faded, a sorrowful expression replacing it. "Not too long ago." "I'm sorry to hear that." Mr. Naruka apologized. "Thank you." Sarada smiled at him for a moment before reopening the clipboard. "But my point was that even after he lost his arm, my father didn't quit being a shinobi and he was still able to protect the village. So don't give up just yet, Sir HN." The man gave her a nonverbal reply, yet he seemed ashamed. His wife smiled at Sarada. "Ignore him," she told her with a giggle. "He just feels guilty of giving up so fast and getting lectured by a young girl." Sarada chuckled back at her. "It's okay, most people I lecture are usually much more injured and in bad shape than he is, so this is a nice change." The woman laughed at that, holding the man's hand, which he didn't withdraw this time. The rest of the checkup went smoothly from there, and she was able to authorize him to leave the hospital. Before heading out of the room, the man grabbed her arm for a moment. His wife was gathering their belongings in the corner of the room, but he still whispered, "Listen, I didn't mean to lash out on you like that. It's just," he seemed at a loss for words. "I know." Sarada smiled at him. "You were angry and you looked for someone to blame. I just happened to be in your crossfire by accident." "You sound like you talk out of experience," the man noted, raising an eyebrow. "Taking your anger out on somebody?" Sarada paused for a moment and blinked. As she'd been taking her anger out on people, she thought about her conversation with Sakura earlier and about how she was pushing Himawari away these last few days. Maybe I am," Sarada admitted. "I hadn't noticed, to be honest." "Well, maybe you should." The man sent her half a smile. "It did wonders for me." Sarada chuckled at that. "I will," she promised him. Reaching the door, she slid it open and looked over her shoulder. "Have a good day, Mr. Naruka," she called to him. "You too, little miss," the man called after her. "Good luck." "Thank you." She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. The conversation with Naruka made her feel a little better and helped her reevaluate her feelings. Walking down the hallway to the reception desk to submit her report on Naruka, she figured she should probably talk with Himawari when she gets home that night. If she was right, Himawari has been having breakfast, lunch and dinner by herself for the last week, and at a time like this when it was important for them all to stick together, to not be alone, she walked into the lobby, into what could only be described as chaos. 3 shinobi were on stretchers, all with terrible wounds and bleeding out. Several nurses and doctors surrounded the stretchers, all attempting to get the shinobi first aid treatment before taking them to the operation room. One of the shinobi was unconscious from blood loss, while the other 2 seemed to be heading there as well, judging from the amount of blood that was spilling from their bodies to the floor. Sarada's heart Was beating fast, her breath staggering, blood, so much blood. No, she shook her head. Snap out of it, she ran to the stretcher with the unconscious man on it. How can I help? She asked the frantic nurse who was giving first aid, healing to one of the deeper wounds on his abdomen. Get ready for surgery, she told Sarada shortly. We need to get moving, she told the other two nurses. They all grabbed the stretcher and started running to the operation room, Sarada running alongside them. How did they get those injuries? She asked the nurse next to her while examining the injuries on the man. Deep cuts covered all of his abdomen's bruises, who were already turning black around his ribcage, and from the looks of it, at least 2 broken ribs and several internal bleedings. It looked like he was beaten half to death, and brutally, so excessively brutally it made Sarada sick. Ninja from the sound, from what I got, the nurse answered her. Sarada's eyes widened. The Sound Village did this. She knew they weren't always the most legal shinobi village, but to do something like this, she thought about Mitsuki, her teammate and friend, who was delicate almost as much as he was deadly. He was always smiling, even though a bit creepily at times, but she could never picture him doing something like this to somebody. This era truly was a warring one, and Sarada wasn't sure how she felt about it. They barged through the doors of the operation room, rolling the stretcher under the light and preparing for surgery. Sarada tied her hair into a short ponytail, pushing her bangs away from her eyes. Her chakra reserves were almost empty, but she'll have to push past it. She'll do all she can to save this man, no matter what. She started with the worst injury on his body, a deep wound in his gut that seemed to have been created by someone driving in their kunai and twisting it. She allowed her chakra to wash over the injury, urging it to mend the ripped muscles and organs, to mend them whole again. She imagined 2 parts of the skin connecting themselves, and pushed her healing chakra to create the same image on the patient's body. She could feel her reserves draining quickly, the sweat on her forehead dripping into her eyes, her arms screaming at her to stop, and her body shaking with the toll she was putting on it. She clenched her jaw and pushed through all of it. There's no way she's letting him die. She can fix this. She can save him. He won't have to die, and then her mother wouldn't have to die. She wouldn't have to go back and save the patients if there are no patients. If Sarada saved all of them now, her mother wouldn't need to save them later, and she wouldn't have to die. Her breath was quickening and her sight was getting blurry despite the glasses she was wearing. Come on, she urged the wound to close. He's crashing, one of the nurses yelled, the beeping of the heart rate monitor becoming more often, barely seconds apart. No, 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 no. Sarada transferred more chakra into her palms, concentrating all of it into her effort to keep him alive. You can't die, you can't, you can't, you can't. She was panting, her knees barely able to hold her standing, her body at his limit, with almost all of her chakra spent and fatigue washing over her. She has to save him, she has to save him, she has to save her. She can't let her die, she can't let her mother die. No, 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 she yelled exactly as the monitor beeped once last time before the line flattened, the beep becoming a long white noise as Sarada stared at the man's now dead body, her hands drenched in blood. As blood, she felt her heart beating fast, her lungs screaming for air as she stopped breathing for a few moments. From the shock in the background, she heard the nurses talk, saying things, talking to her. She heard nothing. It was like she was underwater. The only things she could hear were her heartbeat and the sound of the heart rate monitor telling her she failed, that she could never save her. She looked down at her hands, blood, so much blood. She started breathing heavily, eyes darting all over the room. She looked for a way out. She was suffocating. The room was closing in on her. Let me out, she screamed in her mind. Let me out, she heard herself yell. The nurses looked at her with concern and worry, but she couldn't look at them. Their looks were suffocating, smothering. She needed air. She turned on her heel and ran out of the room, slamming open the door and darting out of the operation room. People who were walking in the hallway looked at her, clothes drenched in blood. There were murmurs all around her. Too loud, way too loud, she needs to get out of there. Running down the hall, she didn't look where she was going and bumped into someone, knocking herself to the floor. I'm sorry, a voice came from above her and made her freeze in place. No, are you okay, Sarada-san? Sakura reached out to her, offering Sarada her hand. No, no, no. Sarada pushed Sakura's hand away and rose to her feet, running away. She heard Sakura's confused and worried questions from behind her, but she kept running. Stay away from me, I can't save you, don't come here. She reached the lobby. All eyes went to her. People who were sitting in the lounge, the people at the reception desk, everyone looking at her, everyone needing her to save them before they die. No, 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 I can't save you, get away from me. Hyperventilating, she bolted through the doors of the hospital outside, bumping into more people who were walking in her opposite direction and continuing to run. She didn't stop and didn't look back. She needs to get away from there. Her sight was blurry and her limbs were aching, But she didn't stop. She needs to be far away from there. This is where they save lives, and this is where her mother lost hers. She ran away, and tried to leave behind the image of the place burning, black smoke rising from the skeleton of the building, and the body of her mother no longer recognizable. Another day, another destroyed wooden pillar. Boruto sighed as he sat against a tree with his eye closed. What was he accomplishing by pushing himself like this? I am managing to beat the shit out of a lot of wood pillars, he noted grimly, and what an accomplishment that was, beating a defenseless, not moving object to a pulp. Sighing again, he took a sip out of his water bottle and looked at the training ground with disinterest. At this rate, all he'll achieve is getting his hands hurt. Taking out his frustration on everything around was one way to work out his anger, but Boruto knew it was only a temporary solution, a quick fix to something he ran from like it was the plague, facing his emotions. It's ironic how I know I'm scared of facing my emotions, but I don't do anything about it, he thought to himself in dark amusement. Guess I'm a coward. After all, the sounds of footsteps brought him out of the self-pity party he was having. He looked up, seeing none other of his uncle Neji walking towards him. Neji Nizan. Boruto greeted his uncle with a nod. Boruto Neji nodded back. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same question, Boruto said, not bothering to get up. Do you need anything I do? Actually, Neji gave him a serious look. We need to talk. Sure. Boruto propped himself up a bit against the tree. What's up? You need to stop feeling sorry for yourself and start taking care of Himawari, Neji told him directly. Boruto felt stunned for a moment, processing what he was just told. After the surprise wore off, he felt angry. Excuse me, he asked his uncle angrily. What do you mean feeling sorry for myself? And what is that about taking care of Himawari? Exactly what you heard. Neji crossed his arms. You have been neglecting her, and it had taken everything I have to restrain myself from intervening, because this is between you and her. Well, you're doing a shitty job at that, Boruto told him dryly. And since when are you the neglect police? Since it became about the happiness of my niece, Neji told him sternly. You've been so busy with your misery you failed to notice that Himawari is suffering as well. Look, Boruto was getting annoyed. I know Himawari is hurt, okay, but so am I, and we both need to work it out on our own, so there's no need for you to lecture me. Neji uncrossed his arms and openly glared at him. No need for me to lecture to you, he repeated after Boruto. When was the last time you had a conversation with Himawari or Sarada? Himawari hasn't been eating or sleeping well for the last week, and refuses to tell you about it because she doesn't want to burden you. Boruto stopped for a moment to comprehend what Neji was telling him. Himawari hasn't been eating, doesn't want to burden him. What's with that? Well, Boruto, Neji snapped at him. What do you have to say for yourself? Is Himawari not eating? Boruto asked quietly after a pause. Or sleeping for that matter? Neji's shoulders relaxed a bit and he sighed. She misses your parents, Boruto, but she also misses you. It's like she lost you as well as them. Boruto felt like garbage. His sister is suffering, and he's just sitting here wallowing in self-pity. What kind of big brother is he? And Sarada, she told him how badly she was hurting, and aside from comforting her that one time, he did nothing else to help her. He promised himself he'll protect them. That's why he was training himself so hard, but he wasn't there when they needed him. I really am the worst, aren't I? Boruto said with a small smile, a self-deprecating one. Neji shook his head. I don't think you are. He offered Boruto a hand to help him get up. You just lost yourself in your sorrow. It's understandable. Boruto took Neji's hand and got up. Thanks, but there's no avoiding the truth, he told Neji. I neglected my family and I need to make it right. Neji smiled at him. Then go do that. He moved aside to let Boruto pass. Boruto started walking but was stopped when Neji placed a hand on his shoulder. And Boruto, if I ever hear that you were making my niece suffer, nephew or not, I will be coming for you, Neji told him, with veins popping on either side of his eyes, a smile still on his face. Boruto gulped nervously. I won't, I promise. Very well then. Neji removed his hand. Go help your family, Boruto. I will. Tabasa. Boruto ran. He needs to get to them and show them they don't need to hide things from him. They are all he has now, and he'd be damned if he wouldn't protect them until his last breath. What do you mean she's not here? Boruto asked the receptionist of the hospital. Like I said, the receptionist repeated herself. Sarada-san left around 45 minutes ago. I don't know where she went. TCH. Boruto wondered why Sarada would suddenly leave like this. What was she doing before she left? Well, according to the report, she was in an emergency surgery that failed. After that, the nurses said she ran out of the room without saying anything. The reception informed him, reading from a paper that was likely the said report. Surgery gone wrong. Boruto's eye widened. So she couldn't save someone who was dying now. He understood why Sarada ran. He needs to find her, and fast. He thanked the receptionist and turned to leave, trying to think of places Sarada would go. Be Boruto-san. A voice from behind him made him stop. He turned to see Sakura standing behind him wearing a doctor's white coat with a few splashes of red that looked like dried up blood. What are you doing here? Is Sarada-san okay? Oh, Boruto didn't know how to talk to Sakura. Is this how Sarada has been feeling for the last week? I just came to pick Sarada up, but they told me she left a while ago. She did. Sakura nodded. She looked like she was about to be sick. I heard she lost a patient today. It must have been a shock to her losing her patient for the first time. No. Boruto felt the urge to clarify. Sarada's been a medic for almost 4 years. She has lost patients in her past. This time it was someone else who she couldn't save. It wasn't the first time. Sakura blinked. What do you mean? It's nothing. Forget about it. Boruto dismissed his words. Anyway, I need to go look for her. Excuse me, will she be alright? Sakura asked him, stopping him in his tracks. He turned to her and saw her worried face. He forgot how caring she is. I don't know, he admitted. I hope so. Me too. Sakura smiled at him. Good luck, Boruto-san. Thanks. Boruto nodded at her. Sakura-san, he added as an afterthought, turning his back from her. He failed to notice the weird expression she wore, holding her head, both her hands, and massaging her temple. He walked out of the hospital and looked up at the sky. The sun was slowly setting, golden light showering everything. It was going to get dark soon, and he still has no idea where to find Sarada. Think, Boruto told himself. This is Sarada. Where would she go? She needs to be alone in an unknown environment. But this is not an unknown environment. It's still Konoha, just not there. So she'll go somewhere she knows from their time. So it needs to be something that exists at this time. He let his eye wander over the village, trying to think of a spot that would mean something to Sarada. A spot that would comfort her. His eye stopped at the sight of the 5 giant stone heads of the Hokage, all reflecting the light of the sun. That's it. He channeled chakra to his feet and jumped to the top of the building in front of him, running across the rooftops to the Hokage mountain. He wondered how he hasn't thought of it sooner. Why wouldn't she be there when her dream was to be the Hokage? Reaching the stairs to the mountain, he stopped. This isn't just a memorable place for Sarada, it also meant something to him. This is where he resolved to take the same path as his master, where he used to prank his dad and spar with him, and where his battle with him happened. This is also the place where the vortex appeared and sent him, Sarada and Himawari, to the past. No, don't chicken out now. Boruto mentally slapped himself. You're going there for Sarada, do it for her. Pushing aside his feelings, Boruto ran up the stairs, taking 2 of them at a time. Reaching up to the top, he looked out on the village. In Konoha was certainly a sight to see. A bustling village at sunset. When the sun would go out, all of the districts will light up their neon signs and the streets' lamps will turn on, making it a sight to behold. He almost relaxed seeing such a familiar scene. Shaking his head from those thoughts, he turned to the faces of the Hokage, who were looking out to the whole village. He strained his eye a bit, but managed to locate a lone figure with black hair sitting on top of the 4th Hokage's head. Walking up to her, he placed his hands in his pockets. There you are, he called out to her. I've been looking everywhere for you. She flinched, her head buried between her arms. Sarada, he stood next to her. She didn't answer him, her curled position not moving. He decided to continue talking instead. I went to look for you at the hospital, but they said you ran away from there. He informed her. They were really worried about you, you know. Still no answer. He sighed. What happened? Sarada, his ear caught the end of a sentence. What? He asked her. I couldn't save her. She talked louder. Who? Boruto sat down next to her, crossing his legs. Mama, Sarada said, her body trembling slightly. I couldn't save her. Oh, of course. Boruto sighed again and placed a comforting hand on her back. I know I couldn't save my mother either, and I regret it. You couldn't have saved her because you weren't in the village when it happened. Sarada lifted her head from her arms to yell at him. I could have saved Mama. If only I wasn't so late. Tears were streaming down her face. If only I wasn't so late, she would still be alive. Boruto stayed quiet. He didn't know what to say to her, how to help her. He kept his hand on her back in hopes it will bring her some kind of comfort. Hey, Boruto. Sarada didn't look at him, staring at the slowly vanishing sun. Instead, yeah. Boruto closed his eye and listened to the rustle of the tree leaves behind them. Why do people die? Sarada asked him. I don't know. Boruto said, eyes still closed. He felt the slow and lazy afternoon wind on his face, reminding him of simpler days. What about how the people who lost someone, how do they get over it? She asked him, sounding almost desperate. I don't think they do, Boruto said, opening his eye to look at her. She had a lost expression on her face, one he hadn't seen in a long time. I think they only learn how to live with the pain, not get over it. Well, do you think you can learn to live with it? Sarada asked him. Boruto paused for a moment. I hope so, he said, looking at the sunset. I know it wouldn't be easy, but I also don't want to run away from it anymore. I don't want to run away from it either, Sarada said, leaning against his arm. But it hurts so much. Of course it does. Boruto's hand went to hold her arm, bringing her closer to him while his other hand supported his weight. But that's just life, I guess. Since when did you get this smart? Sarada asked, sniffing and smirking at him. I was always this smart, you just never listened to me, Boruto teased her. Of course you were. Sarada's tone was sarcastic. And she rolled her eyes. They sat in silence for a few minutes, soaking in each other's company. They each had their feelings about everything that happened to them, but after only a short conversation with each other they felt better. It was one of those solutions Boruto always wished he could have thought of before, and once he had wondered what took him so long to figure it out. Being with the people he cared about was the only way to get over losing someone he cared about. Wait, he remembered, wasn't that what Neji was telling him? Shit, he mumbled. Sarada moved from his grasp to look at him. What's wrong, Himawari? Boruto told her. Neji came to talk to me earlier, said she was barely eating or sleeping all week. Sarada's eyes widened. You're right, she said, moving to get up. I was so busy with the hospital I forgot to check on her. Boruto stood up and brushed his clothes. We really are the worst, huh? Don't lump me in with you. She jabbed his chest with her finger. At least I was working. You were just out there doing God knows what and didn't come home at all. Yeah, can you save the blame for later? Boruto glanced at the almost gone sun. We should get home before it's dark. Himawari will worry if we both won't show up. Yeah, Sarada nodded. Let's go. Himawari sighed as she set the table for herself. One plate, one set of utensils, one cup, dinner enough for three. It was almost dark outside and no sign from either Sarada or Boruto. Maybe Sarada took the night shift again, and Boruto Himawari could only hope he's been eating right. The apartment was almost completely dark aside from the soft light of the lamp from the living room illuminating the kitchen slightly. She didn't want a lot of light. Her head was full of thoughts about what Neji had told her, hate and blame. She wondered she knew who she should feel that way about, but sighing again she sat down at the table and clapped her hands. Thank you for the food, she said softly. Taking a spoon she dug into the curry and rice she made, blowing on it before eating it. The apartment was quiet, besides the sounds of her spoon grating against the plate and the clock on the wall ticking, tick 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 tock. I'm sorry, Neji and Himawari looked at her barely eaten meal, losing her appetite. I'm just not hungry. She only tried to eat because she didn't want him to worry about her, but the truth was that every time she sat down at the empty table she felt like if she'd eat anything at all she'll throw up. It was like she had a black hole inside her heart, sucking away everything and leaving her empty. She didn't know what to do anymore. It was like it sucked out the light in her life. Her eyes stung and she blinked rapidly to make the tears that were threatening to spill go away. She hated it, feeling so alone, hated it so much, sitting in the dark cold apartment, eating alone, sleeping alone, not knowing anybody on the streets. She knew who she should blame for all of it. She knew who she should hate, be angry at. She understood who it was that made her feel this way in the first place, and yet the sound of the front door slamming open made her jump in her seat. Himawari, Boruto's voice called out to her. Oni-chan. Himawari didn't understand. I'm here, she said, raising her voice slightly so that he could hear her. She heard shuffling in the hall, and then two pairs of footsteps were walking towards the kitchen. She turned around just when Sarada and Boruto barged into the kitchen, both panting. Boruto's clothes were tattered and Sarada's face and clothes were covered in dried up blood. What happened? Himawari rose from her chair and ran to them as soon as she reached them. However, they both pulled her into a tight hug as she felt confused. Boruto buried his face into her hair and Sarada held her so tightly she thought her ribs were going to crack. What are you? We're so sorry, Hima, Boruto told her, his hand that supported the back of her head bringing her even closer to him. I'm so sorry. What? Himawari felt her eye fill with tears and tried to blink them away. What are you talking about? We were so busy, Sarada said, tightening her hold on Himawari. We didn't notice how you were feeling. Himawari tried to swallow the lump in her throat to no avail. I'm fine, don't worry about me. She tried to sound happy. Don't burden them. A voice in her mind said, they are suffering enough. Don't hide how you're feeling from me. Boruto separated himself from her and looked her in the eyes, both his arms on her shoulders. I'm your older brother. You should always be able to tell me how you're feeling. Is only I was shining. His expression breaking her heart. Himawari, Sarada said, her tone making her look her in the eyes. I may not be your family by blood, but you and Boruto are the only ones I have left, so don't push me away like this. She had been crying. Himawari noticed her eyes were red and puffy. She tried to smile at them. I'm fine. Her heart was screaming at her for lying. Please don't worry about me. Would you stop that already? Boruto yelled, startling her. You're not fine, so stop it already. Himawari's eyes widened with shock. She was hurting them. She tried to swallow the LP in her throat, but it didn't go away. Her vision was getting blurry and her shoulders shook under her brother's grasp. I'm sorry, she choked. I'm sorry. They looked alarmed. What are you talking about? Boruto asked her gently. There's nothing for you to be sorry about. There's, Himawari argued. I burdened you with this. You shouldn't need to worry about me, neither of you. Of course I do. Boruto looked surprised. Hima, I'm your brother. It's my job to worry about you, and you're like a little sister to me. Sarada added, there's no way I won't care about you, but Himawari was doing everything in her power to choke back the sobs. You what? Boruto asked. What is it? I don't hate him, Himawari yelled, her tears spilling. Boruto and Sarada looked stunned. You don't hate who? Boruto's voice was quiet. Kawaki. Himawari saw How he flinched at the name, how Sarada's face was torn. With conflicted emotions, I don't hate him for what he did, I'm so sorry Oni-chan. Himawari. Boruto's face was concealed by his bangs. Why do you think you should apologize to me? Because I know it's his fault. Himawari said he was the one who I know that. Boruto stopped her mid-sentence. But why apologize to me? Himawari's eyes widened. Why apologize to him? Because Kawaki was like his brother, he betrayed them. And it took a toll on Boruto's soul. He's been carrying the burden and blame for everything that happened on his back ever since, and her not hating Kawaki, isn't that like a slap in the face for Boruto? Himawari. Boruto's voice was gentle. Let me tell you something. She listened closely. I don't hate him either, he said, stunning Himawari and Sarada. What? Sarada asked. But I thought that I hate him. Boruto smiled sadly at her. I don't hate him, I guess I'm just hurt. I know it was always my fault for him turning out this way. In a way, what happened to the village is all on me. No. Himawari wiped her tears away and looked at her brother sternly. You are not responsible for anything, Oni-chan. She's right, Boruto. Sarada agreed with her, her expression bordering anger. If anything, it's Kara's fault. Boruto stared at the two of them for a moment before sighing and giving them a lopsided smile. You two are scary when you're angry, he said. I almost want to agree with you so that you won't kill me. We might kill you either way, Sarada pointed out. Yeah, Boruto rolled his eye and chuckled, opening his arms. Come here, both of you. Himawari sniffed and moved into his arms, wrapping her arms around his torso and burying her face in his chest. She felt Sarada awkwardly place herself next to her. Boruto circled them in his hold and hugged them tightly. I have an idea, he said. How about we promise that from now on we won't hide things from each other anymore? Sarada laughed slightly. Yeah, it sucks when we do that. Himawari nodded into his shirt. Let's do it. Good. Boruto released them from his hold. Himawari wiped away the remaining tears from her face while Sarada was adjusting her glasses. Boruto looked at both of them with a small smile. Suddenly Sarada's stomach growled, making her face turn red with embarrassment. Boruto's attempt at covering his little burst of laugh failed, and she punched him in the gut, knocking the air out of his and making him fold. Don't laugh, idiot, she yelled at him. What the hell was the punch for? Boruto yelled back at her. They stared down at each other for a few moments before Himawari broke into laughter in front of them. She laughed so hard her stomach ached and tears formed in the sides of her eyes. Himawari. Boruto sounded surprised. I'm sorry, she choked out between laughs. It's just you two never change, she told them, leaving them stunned for a moment before Boruto started grinning. I guess we don't, he declared. And anyway, is there something to eat around here? I wouldn't want Sarada to starve to base, he said. However, his stomach then made a noise that topped the one Sarada's made. Yeah, Himawari. Sarada smirked. Do we have anything to eat? Boruto is about to starve. Very funny. Boruto made a face. But seriously, Hima, is there something to eat? Yeah. Himawari showed them to the table. I made curry and rice. Ah, you're the best. Boruto opened a few cabinets and got himself and Sarada plates and utensils. Himawari giggled. It's nothing, she said modestly. Boruto placed the plates on the table and Sarada took one for herself. Himawari went to turn on the lights in the kitchen. Boruto poured a generous amount of curry onto his rice, mumbling a quick thank you before starting to shove food in his mouth. Sarada rolled her eyes at his doing and said a proper prayer before starting to eat delicately. Himawari sat down and started to eat as well, finding the plate in front of her much more appetizing than it seemed before. They spent the rest of dinner chatting and enjoying their meal, soaking in each other's presence. It might not be perfect or even fix how they were all feeling, but it was a start. Oh yeah. Boruto looked up at them from his food. I was thinking of getting a job soon. Sarada's spoon stopped before it reached her mouth. You a job? She choked a laugh. I'd like to see that. Hey, I can work at a job, Boruto protested, offended at his friend's little faith of him. Sure you can, Sarada giggled, rolling her eyes. Sarada. Boruto pouted at her reaction. Himawari could almost see the two's thought process as they thought the other was adorable. She giggled at her brother and friend being oblivious and stuffed her spoon in her mouth, deciding she'll watch them a little more before saying anything about their obvious crushes on each other. And Hanabi must be rubbing off on me, she thought to herself. Oh well, what's the worst that could happen? Sarada tapped her leg against the road impatiently as she stared at the changing sky. It was getting dark and she wanted to be at the hospital before her shift starts. She listened to Himawari and took 2 days off work to relax and get her bearings before taking any more shifts, and made sure to apologize to Tsunade for all the trouble she has caused. The Hokage took her absence rather well, luckily, and wished for her to rest. What's taking Boruto so long? She glanced at the ramen shop to her right. Boruto offered to escort her to the hospital that night, but asked that they'd make one quick stop at the ramen shop before they go. Sarada had a shadow of suspicion as to Why he wanted to stop there but held her tongue knowing he'll tell her when he's ready. It was the thing with Boruto, I'm holding all of his feelings and thoughts, and until he feels comfortable sharing them. Her thoughts were cut abruptly when the blonde in question stepped out of the ramen shop smiling proudly. Hey, he said as he walked towards her. Sorry to keep you waiting. Are you going to tell me what was that about? Sarada asked him as they started to walk down the road to the hospital. I was just finalizing the details of my new job. Boruto smirked proudly. You got a job at Ichiraku? Sarada lifted an eyebrow, so her hunch about his motives was right after all. Yup. Boruto shoved his hands into his pockets. I guess I wanted to have some sort of connection with him, even if it's like this. He shrugged and looked sheepish. Sarada smiled softly. He was trying his best at sharing, wasn't he? He looked pretty cute, embarrassed, and childish like that. Whoa, her mind came to a screeching halt after noticing the direction her thoughts were headed. Nope, not happening, not today. Sarada. Boruto looked over at her. Is everything okay? Sarada shook her head. Yeah, everything's fine, I'm fine. Okay. Boruto raised an eyebrow at her behavior but said nothing else. He glanced up at the crescent moon that shone above them and smiled slightly. Seriously, why'd I had to fall for that guy? Sarada wondered helplessly. They continued to make their way to the hospital in silence, one girl hopelessly trying to fight off her emotions, and the boy next to her clueless as to what was happening to his friend. Sakura was almost finished with her paperwork for the night and went to the reception desk to submit some of it. Just as she was finishing up, Sarada and Boruto walked in. Sarada with an overnight bag ready for her shift. Ah, Sarada-san. Sakura went over to them. Are you feeling better? We were all worried about you, she told the girl. Sarada seemed a little perplexed, but Boruto gave her a light jab in the ribs with his elbow and smiled at her. Go on, he encouraged Sarada. Sarada glared at him but took a deep breath and faced Sakura again. Yes, I'm feeling much better now, she informed Sakura. Thank you for your concern. I have to go prepare for my shift now. And with that she bowed to Sakura and moved stiffly inside the hospital. Sakura watched her go with worry. Is she really okay? She asked Boruto, who shrugged and rubbed the back of his head. She's Sarada, he said as if it made everything clear. She acts weird and you learn to get used to it after a while. You sound like you're talking from experience. Sakura raised an eyebrow at his relaxed speech and manners. He reminded her of Naruto, but maybe a bit calmer. Yeah, well, he shrugged. I've known her ever since we were kids. We were together almost all of our lives. Lovers. Sakura teased him. His face turned red and he waved his hands in panic. No, nothing like that, he said frantically. She's a friend, just a friend. Sure. Sakura wasn't buying it for a second. Well, I have some documents to finish up. It was nice seeing you, Boruto-san. Boruto chuckled. It was nice seeing you too, Sakura-san, he said, and Sakura's muscles tensed for some reason. Keep an eye on Sarada for me, will you? I promise. Sakura nodded, feeling a strange pain building up between her eyes. He waved her goodbye and left, walking out of the automatic doors with his hands behind his head. He looks like Naruto, Sakura thought to herself, almost twins. If not for that scar on his eye, she wondered if someone ever tried healing it, and what was the damage under the eyelid. The pain between her eyes intensified and she bit her lip to keep the groan on the tip of her tongue inside. What was going on? She made her way to the break room, sitting down on a chair as soon as she arrived and releasing the groan she was holding back. Her head was pounding and she grabbed both its sides and tried to massage her temples to lessen the pain. Pictures flashed in her mind, blood flashes of blonde hair. She was trying to heal someone. Who was it? She leaned in closer, trying to take a good look at the wound under her hands. There were sounds of battle behind her. The sound of hurrying footsteps behind her became louder and she knew it was going to reach her any minute, but she has to finish healing this person's wound otherwise. Sakura fell off the chair to the floor, eyes wide and panting. The pain in her head was slowly residing, but she could still feel it in the back of her head, or maybe that was just from it hitting the floor. The scenes she just saw in her mind, were they real? When did that happen? Who was she healing? And that voice that she heard calling her, she'd recognize it anywhere. There was no doubt in her mind that that voice belonged to him. It was Sasuke's voice.